Hello, my friends. Let's take a nice breath. Make the ah sound. Let the breathing come back to normal. Welcome back to the 40 days. So we have just a little bit more over a week left, not that much longer. And so I just want to talk about some of the elements that I find that make human life really, really challenging. And one of those elements to me is that as human beings, we exist at the nexus of the contradiction. We exist at that point when things just don't make sense. I remember reading the book years ago by Mr. Hawkins. I think it was called A Brief History of the Universe. I'm not sure. It's been a long time. But one of the things that he talked about that I found interesting, I really didn't pick up much of it. There was only one thing that I remember, but I feel like if you get one major thing out of a book, you can consider that book to have been a success. At least one major thing. And so one of the things that he talked about was how on the macro level they have certain rules, and on the micro level they have certain rules. But at a certain point when they cross, they become contradictory. They don't fit anymore. It doesn't make sense. And so to me, this is where we exist as human beings. We exist at the point where things can be contradictory, where you can find something that you know is true and put your whole life on it, and then find the opposite and have it also be true, but have it short-circuitous. We as human beings don't deal well with the fact that contradictory things that can be true. You can be right and wrong at the same time. So I want to bring this up because it's one of those elements that relates to the whole element of being a fractal. As above, so below. And one of those elements that I would like to point to, these contradictory elements. How do we handle it when we know something is true and we find that the contradiction of it is also true? How do we handle it, when we learn from Buddhism that that desire is the seed of suffering, and learning from manifestation practice that you have to have a burning desire in order to be a success, in order to have what you would like to see come about? How do we jive those? For me, it was really helpful or really supportive for me when I studied Buddhism and I learned that the Buddha supposedly had a burning desire to see the end of suffering, the cessation of suffering. At that point, I realized that you could have a burning desire and have it fit with the purpose of the whole. And to me, in my point of view, having a burning desire is only wrong when it turns into greed. When you are not working for the benefit of the whole, but working for your own sense of individualism, your own sense of separateness, that turns into greed. And that's when desire, for me, goes wrong. So it's helpful for us to understand these contradictory elements. Another one I think is really important is the relationship to surrender. In manifestation practice, when I came across Napoleon Hill, he talked about the importance of having a consciousness that did not accept surrender. It's I think was it Alcibiades? I can't remember. It was an ancient Greek that he talks about in Think and Grow Rich, who supposedly burned his ships so his men couldn't go back home. They had to win. This idea of winning at all costs, of never surrender. And there's something really powerful about that. When you don't even allow yourself to have even the inkling of a willingness to surrender, you can gather great power. However, we also want to remember that the difference between surrender and capitulation. Because surrender, in my mind, eventually is an acceptance of what is. Capitulation is when you give in to an enemy, And to me, surrender is really about having the strength and the courage to admit where you are in your life at a particular time. It would be foolish for me to not surrender playing basketball, right? I used to be a relatively good basketball player. I could dunk a basketball. If I tried to dunk a basketball at this point, I am going to need emergency services on the court, right? Because I can't do that anymore. I am still very, very physical, but it's a completely type of different physicality. I have had to surrender the type of physicality I once had in my life. I used to lift really, really heavy, and it really messed up my joints. I played football. I had to surrender and develop a different relationship. And as a result, I'm actually more in flow with who I feel I really am by learning to surrender to what is. Surrendering to what is not capitulation. Surrender to what is a statement of power. It's inevitable that we are all going to surrender. It's inevitable. That's called death. You're going to surrender eventually, and you're going to surrender to change. Some part of us sees change as a form of dying. So let's remember that when we truly surrender in the right situations, it's not a failure, it's actually a success, because we catapult ourselves into the next era of our life, or what is to come next in our experience. So please remember, surrender and capitulation are not the same. Yes, on some level, we want to have that burning desire that does not even have an inkling of failure. And at the same time, when it's time for us to surrender, we want to do it gracefully. It's important to leave a party before you're asked to leave by the police, right? It's not surrender when you leave when it's time to leave. So, just want to thank you for your time. And remember, let's surrender to what is so we can build what will be. We can learn to love our life exactly as it is. To me, true surrender is called unconditional love. Doesn't mean that you don't still have your own focus and your commitment, but you don't have one area that you are so charged by that it begins to create a self-destructive pattern. All right? So I'm going to ring the bell. I'm going to ask you to listen carefully. Here we go. So let's understand that on some level, that at times, surrender is the ultimate statement of strength. I bring my hands in the prayer position and I bow to you, my friend. Namaste. Thank you.